right, I'm here with boxing commentator and ring announcer Ray Flores. Ray, welcome to Ringside Reporter. How you doing today?
Hey, Joe, really appreciate the invitation. It is a pleasure to join you. And you know what? It's a fun time for boxing. I hope all of your viewers are safe and sound during this COVID-19 pandemic. But it's great that we got the sweet science back.
Awesome. And, speaking about the sweet science, boxing's back. It's on a lot of networks, a lot of platforms. And, we have some big fights coming down the pike. And I didn't think this card, this last past Saturday, was bad at all. Talk about what your thoughts were about the card and why the criticism and why the comparisons going back to the UFC again. I thought we were done with this UFC versus boxing. I know we saw a tweet with Teddy Atlas. I thought that was kind of uncalled for. Give your take on all that, and why are people just so unsatisfied now that we have this sport back?
I don't know, Joe, and you bring up a great point, is that I am a fan of both. I'm a fan of everything fighting, as I've mentioned at length on social media. I covered UFC 100. I covered UFC 129. I covered several WC events back before it was consolidated. The lighter weight classes were consolidated into the UFC ranks. I love the MMA. I love boxing. I love kickboxing. Anything fighting, I gravitate towards, because I admire these athletes for literally risking their lives every single time they step in between the ropes or in the octagon or in a cage, whatever form of competition that they do. I respect them all. I'm tired of hearing the UFC versus boxing, or boxing versus the UFC. We need to be done with that, because the one thing about it, Joe, is that instead of us focusing on the fighters, there's so many world-class fighters in every form of combat sport. We're having this ridiculous debate on what's better. Why does the UFC do this? Why does boxing do this? Or what's the problem with boxing? What's the problem with the UFC? That's an all negative. They both have pros and cons. But at the end of the day, we see world-class athletes performing and fighting against one another to try to become world champions. And at this time, Joe, in a boxing and MMA standpoint, they're young, hungry champions that want to fight each other. From a boxing standpoint, it isn't as, I'm not going to say MMA is monopolized, but to a point it is, because the UFC is the cream of the crop when it comes to MMA. In boxing, it's a little bit different. You have various promoters, various networks involved. So you have more people that have a say-so that need to come together to make a big prize fight. But we are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. I was around and involved from a talent standpoint during Wilder Fury #2, February 22nd in Las Vegas, that entire week. And I got to tell you, PBC and Top Rank, TGB Promotions and Top Rank, they worked so well together. It opened up the door for more cross-promotional fights to happen. But we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. Plus, the high-level boxers, from a number standpoint, get paid more than what high-level MMA guys do. So we need to have fans to be able to pay the boxers what they truly deserve. And it's not like boxing isn't putting on compelling fights. We are, but the cross-promotional fights that the fans are clamoring for, once the fans are able to come back, those fights will happen. If this pandemic wouldn't have transpired, I think we would have seen maybe one or two more big promotional crossover fights if the worldwide pandemic didn't take place. I'm just done with the negativity across the board in every aspect of combat sports. We have young, hungry champions that want to go up against each other. Let's just sit back and enjoy the ride, please.
And how could you not be excited about this pay-per-view that's on Saturday upcoming with the Charlo brothers, Derevyanchenko, Jamel Charlo, versus Rosario? I mean, these are great matchups, okay? And we got Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez coming down the pike. And as you said, boxing is starting to come together now. Bob is starting to work with Al now. There's talk about Spence versus Crawford somewhere down the road. Crawford versus Porter. I mean, there's a lot of positive things going on right now to look forward to. And I don't subscribe to this theory that you have to subtract from one to add to the other.
No.
It doesn't by crapping all over boxing. It doesn't. There's no positivity in this. And Teddy Atlas has been in this game for so long. He's made a living off of this. And again, he has a right to his own opinion. But what is the end game here? What is the motive? What does he hope to gain by trashing the sport of boxing? I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, and I don't want to speak for you and put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But there has to be some degree of bitterness with this man, because maybe things did not work out the way he wanted in the sport of boxing. Maybe he didn't get everything out of the sport of boxing that he wanted. So now he's bitter towards it. And now all of a sudden he wants to cape for the UFC. By all means, be a fan of the UFC. I'm a fan of the UFC. Obviously, I'm more of a fan of boxing.
Yeah.
But you know,
but don't down boxing. That's the whole thing, is that it's okay to praise one, but not down the other. And essentially my criticism towards what Teddy Atlas said on Saturday was, why do you have to go down that road and criticize boxing when, you know, he was around? He's done so much for the sport. I respect him. I've worked with him before.
He's got his foundation and everything. Yeah, gives back.
As a young guy that's in this business, that loves this business, that goes up and down the road and sees the fighters, when I see opinions like Teddy Atlas getting credence from MMA fans, what that does, and from fight fans in general, that deters fight fans from focusing on the young stories, the great stories in boxing, like the Charlos, like the Teofimo Lopez's of the world, because we're having this hot take conversation about, oh, well, quote unquote, why boxing sucks or why boxing needs to be fixed. Well, I think every major sport needs to be fixed to a degree, not just boxing. I don't think that MMA is all holy and high and mighty. No sport is. We need to change things for the better across the board. That is the evolution of life. But I can't stand the old guard being upset and negative and disrespecting the sport that they made a living off of for years and years and years. I mentioned this yesterday on social media, Joe, and I'll reiterate it. Imagine covering the NFL and making a great living off of the NFL for 30 plus years. And then you're away from it for 2 or 3 years. And then you say, you know what? The NFL sucks. The NFL needs to be reformed. The NFL is this, the NFL is that. You know what? Everyone shouldn't watch the NFL. You should watch the NBA, and only the NBA, because the NBA is doing A, B, C, D, E, perfectly. It's like, give me a break. I'm tired of the nonsense. I'm tired of the rhetoric. And it's like, listen, if you have sour grapes, that's fine. That's life. But don't necessarily turn your back on the sport that gave you the living that you now enjoy. He gave a lot, but the sport also gave a lot to him too. So let's not be hypocritical in that regard.
And Ray, he never had to take a punch in his life either. And he was able to make the money he made too. So
I
why
respect all fighters?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. And I'm protective over being positive and focusing on the fighters,
right.
Because you know what? I never took a punch. I wasn't a professional. So it's my duty as a commentator, and when I interview and when I host, to make sure that these fighters' stories are told. A punch is a punch, a kick's a kick, wins and losses. Anybody can look that up, but it's my job to tell their story. And when I see hot takes that are being taken upon and people are discussing those hot takes instead of focusing on the fact that we got Jamal Charlo, Sergey Derevyanchenko, Teofimo Lopez, Vasily Lomachenko, talking about the young up-and-coming stars, the Ryan Garcias of the world, the Gervonta Davises of the world. To be frank with you, Joe, it pisses me off.
We got a great schedule coming up. I mean, I'm pumped for as you said, Tank Davis, Leo Santa Cruz. I'm pumped for that fight. I'm pumped for next week's pay-per-view. I mean, there's a lot of things to look forward to here. Bob Arum, I spoke with him. He's trying hard to get this Wilder Fury 3 fight wrapped up in December, and it's quite possible that it could happen. Huge fight. Joshua's fighting this year.
Yeah, he's fighting for Brad Pulev.
Pulev, he's got his mandatory with Pulev.
I know Charles Martin's waiting in the wings potentially in case, something happens there. This is a great time. And again, Joe, it's in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. So I don't want to hear, the big fights aren't being made in boxing. What are you talking about? Look at the schedule that we're getting ready to embark on.
These November and December and October are really hot months in the sport of boxing. And here's the other thing, Ray. How, like, when was the last time that we were able to watch boxing? Like, we got a card coming up Wednesday night, and then we got a
Exactly.
card coming up. We're watching boxing on multiple days of the week now. Boxing has never been covered by so many platforms. I can't remember when. This back to the days when I was in the barbershop watching Iran Barkley and Roberto Duran on ABC. That was the day. But now, you know, we still have boxing on free TV because Fox is free TV.
Yeah. And
Anyone,
ESPN's the
yeah.
worldwide leader. I mean, you know, they claim they're the worldwide leader. They're doing a great job. You know, we are seeing things. And you know what? Some fights have to go to pay-per-view based on what the fighters make. But here's my response to that. And people, and I understand we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and it's not easy. But it's great that fighters are getting paid from a boxing standpoint what they deserve. They are getting their respective paydays. That's generational wealth. You saw the Forbes article where boxers were right there in the top 100 of overall athletes. That's fantastic. It's great for the health of the sport. It's great because these fighters risk their lives every single time they step between the ropes.
Absolutely. You know, and it's just crazy hearing all this negativity. But another point, Ray, why people should understand this, that, you know, it's such a different model over there because it's only one guy running the show, one guy calling the shots. There's just so many moving parts in the sport of boxing. Everyone by this time should know that there's just so many different ways how the sport of boxing is different than MMA in terms of the, you know, the inner workings and how things are done. You have sanctioning bodies, you have, you know, commissions, you have all these different networks, and you have, you know, even with dealing with Eddie Hearn, if you want to fight over in the UK, that's you have to deal with the BBC. The UFC, it's just one central unit.
Yep.
One guy controls everything.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be easier to make fights under those circumstances. Like, what don't people understand about that?
I think it's a way to try to go ahead and I mean, how many times, let's be honest, Joe, from a bigger picture standpoint, how many times have we heard, and look, the UFC, that's what they do. Credit to them. I'm not hating on them.
I'm not hating either.
I'm not hating either. I think it's great what they do. Their business model works. The fighters accept it. Hey, more power to everyone involved. That's fantastic. When great fights happen in the UFC, it pushes boxing. When great fights happen in boxing, it pushes the UFC. Yeah. But when it comes to looking at the business aspect, and it drives me nuts when fans try to compare the two, it would be like comparing the hard cap in the NFL to the no salary cap in Major League Baseball and then trying to dispute both. It's like they're polar opposites. It's comparing apples to oranges. The only similarity is that they're technically a combat sport. Everything else is way different, Joe.
One belt. We have what, four belts?
Yeah,
and if you want to,
belts.
We got four. And if you want to count all these other secondary titles, the gold and silver title, I mean, we have all these title belts. We have all these different promoters, all these different sanctioning bodies. We have so much. There's so much that's involved in the sport of boxing, whereas UFC is just centralized. Of course, it's going to be different. There's just no comparison. And here's another thing, Ray, and I don't know if you can agree or disagree. When there is a big boxing match, the whole world watches.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. When there was a Mayweather fight, Tyson Fury now, Anthony Joshua, when those two fight, the whole world is going to watch, and nothing outside of probably the World Cup or the Super Bowl is going to be able to compare to that, in my opinion.
I would agree with you, Joe. And you know what? I've been around some very big prize fights over the course of my time. You have as well. And you know, being in Las Vegas for Mayweather Canelo, I felt like the world stopped. Being in Las Vegas for, you know, Mayweather Pacquiao, being in Las Vegas even for Mayweather McGregor, I mean, that was just incredible. Wilder Fury 1 and 2, special moments. I mean, there's nothing like a big championship boxing match in any of the big cities around the world. And we're just so fortunate to be around it. The reason why I'm so upset is because I want to see more positivity, because it's painful to me to see that some of the young stories and the young fighters are being lost because of the minutia of people complaining or having some type of agenda one way or the other. If you're a young fighter, you should be giving the just due and the credit and the publicity and the attention that you deserve. A guy that even, I enjoy watching it, called this fight in February, and now he's doing very, very well. He's become like one of the darlings of boxing, Clay Collard.
Yeah.
I love a story like that.
Yeah.
When I'm watching Clay Collard and Joe, I watch everything. I watch the UFC. I watch, everything boxing. But Clay Collard, what a story to come. The working man's fighter coming out and his success. I love seeing that. I want to hear more about Clay Collard, stories like that, instead of having this ridiculous conversation on why boxing needs to be reformed or why the UFC is so much better. It's like, look, they're both great in their own right. Let's just enjoy it. That's all.
And now we're trying to pull ratings into this. And like, again, no one's getting the check off of the ratings. Well, maybe you are, Ray, but most of us aren't getting the check off of the ratings.
Well, the ratings are down everywhere.
Everywhere.
Across the board. So, and the reason why is because we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. People found ulterior ways for entertainment, but the fans are coming back because they were people that were cord cutting. Sports weren't around for a while. You know this, out of sight, out of mind. That's what happened. But people are starting to come back. I'm starting to feel some buzz for the Charles doubleheader pay-per-view.
100%.
Teofimo Lopez, Vasily Lomachenko. Damn, that's a good fight. The card that we have on Wednesday, I think is going to be excellent. Nestor Bravo making his main event debut from Puerto Rico. Kid's looking to become a world champion from
Gallegos
Puerto Rico.
versus Gallegos,
a tough guy in Jose Luis Gallegos. I mean, you got two undefeated guys with Renfis Encarnacion. He's in a matchup against Victor Pasillas. I think that's a fun matchup. And it's all things that I'm excited to talk about because it's about generating new fans. Everyone, you can be a fan of the UFC, you can be a fan of boxing and enjoy them both. To me, I love watching football. I'm a big football fan, Joe. And I love watching college football when I can. I watch every NFL game, Red Zone. I watch my Bears, et cetera, et cetera. I don't complain that there's too much football on television. So why is there this stigma that there's too much fighting on television, oversaturation? Well, if you don't like it, don't watch. But the more, the better for everybody.
Yeah, and Bob Arum, when I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, he told me that the shows that they were doing, they were number one in their time slots. They were doing good ratings in their time slots, like 300 on a weeknight. Topping off at like 300,000, 400,000 viewers. That's not bad on a weeknight.
Exactly. I mean,
in the summertime too, when people are on vacation and stuff like that, you got to take everything into consideration here.
I think people are too critical and want to be negative. And that's the thing, Joe, is that I'm not going to be that negative person. I'm of the belief, and this is even before the pandemic, when a fight's announced, instead of ripping it or disrespecting it, I let it happen first. And then you can make your assessment, because some of the best upsets, some of the biggest, most miraculous stories in combat sports have come from quote unquote paper mismatches. So that's why, who am I to judge if a fight sucks or not? Let it happen first, then make your assessment.
Oh yeah. So Ray, let me ask you this. I believe you started as a ring announcer. How did you transition into the broadcasting role? How did that come about? Because I remember for the longest time seeing you just being the ring announcer, and all of a sudden one day I saw you at broadcast and I was like, well, that's the ring announcer. What's he doing behind the mic?
Well, I started off, I've been in combat sports since I was 17. I started doing like local commentary for MMA fights when I was 17 years old at a local TV station in Northwest Indiana. I'm from East Chicago, Indiana. There's a former world champion at 135 pounds from the WEC, Miguel Torres, who was fighting locally before he made his jump to the UFC or to the WEC. So we were following him around, calling his fights. They would air a week later on public access TV. So I started off as a commentator in MMA, and then I always loved boxing, and then I got into boxing, ring announcing locally in the Chicagoland area in MMA. Then I connected with Golden Boy, doing solo book sale, filling in for their main ring announcer Joe Martinez, and then doing Mayweather undercards, and then hooked up with Banner Promotions, did ESPN Friday Night Fights for several years whenever Banner had a card, and then met up with TGB Promotions in December of 2014 as a ring announcer, transitioned to start doing, press conferences in June of 15, got with PBC in June of 15, but I always let it be known that I love to call fights. That's my ultimate passion. I like ring announcing, but to me, my passion, the thing that I enjoy most in this world more than anything is calling fights, telling the fighters' stories, calling those magical moments. That's what I love. That's what I enjoy. I've been fortunate to be given a great platform and wonderful opportunities. And I want to continue along that mindset and continue with the momentum and hope to continue to move up the ladder when it comes to boxing broadcasting.
Now, as a ring announcer, when you're in that ring during a big event, what's the biggest event that you were a ring announcer at? And did you actually get like goosebumps? Did you feel the electricity from the crowd and just the whole ambiance, the whole surroundings around you? What was the biggest event that you've been part of as a ring announcer?
Joe, a couple of events stand out. One, because as a young guy, I'm 34 now, but I grew up watching HBO and Showtime Championship Boxing. So to me, the best play-by-play man, and this is why I'm so passionate, or reason why I'm so passionate about the sport of boxing, Jim Lampley to me is the greatest play-by-play man to ever live. No one will ever come close to what Jim Lampley did or has done, because I loved his passion. The fact that he would get so emotional sometimes and start crying, and people would kind of like make fun of it. I didn't make fun of it. I enjoyed it. I loved seeing how overwhelmed he became by the emotion. So to be able to ring announce in April of 2015, Lucas Matisse and Ruslan Provodnikov, thanks to Banner Promotions, Matt Rowland, Artie Palullo, Mark Abrams, they went out on the limb. That was a split site doubleheader. Terrence Crawford fought, I believe it was Yuriokis Gamboa, Tomas Delorme in Dallas, and that was a top rank card. Then they came to us in upstate New York, and I ring announced that fight between Provodnikov and Matisse. The second one, or not the second one, but it's like 1 and 1A, right? So to have Jim Lampley throw it up to me in the ring and say, and now here's our ring announcer, Ray Flores, that meant the world, because here's a guy that is a legend. Here's a guy who I look up to. Here's a guy who has paved the way for the younger generation like me as a play-by-play man. He's the Michael Jordan of boxing play-by-play man, and nobody comes close, without a doubt. To have him throw it up to me meant the world to me. It really touched my heart and soul. The place was sold out. Unbelievable. The next one is I work with the World Boxing Super Series whenever I can as well. Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire.
Wow, remember that one?
Saitama Super Arena.
Wow.
20,000+ people. I think there were over 30 million watching in Japan. It was broadcast on DAZN. And the way that the World Boxing Super Series, the Southlands treat me, also the legend, a legendary Japanese promoter, Mr. Honda, who was so gracious and welcoming to me and had me sit next to him during the main event. To be able to have that crowd be so respectful and so raucous, and to see the fight that we saw, and to be able to sit to Mr. Honda, a man who's in the Boxing Hall of Fame, who's done so much for the sport of boxing, that meant the world to me, because even though, he understood me, but we were able to communicate and watch this significant fight for his fighter in Naoya Inoue and Donaire. And Donaire showcased the heart and really turned back the clock. To be a part of that moment.
That was a shocker.
So special to me.
That was a shocker. And we got the Super Series coming up this Saturday too as well. We got Breedis and we got Dorticos.
I think that's going to be a great fight, Joe.
That's another great fight we got coming up,
And then you got Josh Taylor on Saturday. You got the Charlo doubleheader. I mean, see, that's why it's like
so much fights.
Why are we talking about this negativity? Let's talk about what's going on right now, because there's so many great fighters competing.
Man. So many fights. Now you're going to be commentating on Wednesday, correct?
Yeah, I will be the lead commentator alongside the legendary
How do you think?
Goosen.
Yeah, I love Joe Goosen. He's hilarious. Isn't he hilarious?
I
like when he's always cracking on him, and Lennox kind of have that little banter back and forth. So what do you think of this card Wednesday? Do you think these these are going to be like some standout matchups? How do you think this card's going to play out?
Well, look, I'm excited about our main event. Nestor Bravo, Jose Luis Gallegos. Gallegos has been in there with some veterans and stuff. He's coming off a victory. But Nestor Bravo, 17-0, 13 knockouts. This guy, speaking to him today, I won't get into our fighter meeting, but
sure,
just talking with him, he's mature, he's poised, and he has that mentality that he wants to be great. He knows the opportunity that he has main eventing on national television. There's only one world champion right now in Puerto Rico. And for him, he understands what it means and how significant it would be if he keeps moving up the ladder, because it hasn't been, not in recent memory have we seen, with the exception of that one world champion, Puerto Rico really hasn't had its best days. And that's such a rich boxing country. And Nestor Bravo is trying to change that narrative. The co-main event, as I talked about, Ranfis Encarnacion, who's undefeated. He's a power punching fighter from the Dominican Republic. He has a very interesting matchup, against Victor Pasillas, who's undefeated, used to fight for Top Rank, then became a free agent. He's 15-0 with 5 knockouts. He's very smart, very intelligent. He actually beat Jose Luis Ramirez in the amateurs. So, and he's determined. He wants to prove to the world, like, look, I've been watching all these guys that I competed against in the amateurs become world champions. Now it's my time. And how is Encarnacion going to be able to deal with the boxing ability, of Pasillas and Encarnacion? He wants to rip your head off. He wants to come forward and land that home run shot. So what's going to happen? I'm really excited. And it's boxing on a Wednesday night. We're going back to the old school days of boxing, Joe. We're putting fights on a Wednesday night, in the middle of the week. And we're just getting, this is going to get you revved up. This is I don't know if you like crab kicks, but to me, that's one of my favorite appetizers. We're getting you a damn good appetizer for the main course. That's the weekend.
On Saturday,
you can enjoy. So Wednesday, we're going to give you a heck of an appetizer. And then Saturday, you get a lot of main courses.
Now, I'm going to ask you your opinion on a couple of fights. Are you allowed to pick winners because you're a commentator, or you have to stay?
I try to stay away from it.
Stay away from that,
just because I have to call it unfair, or not unfair, but I have to call it fair and unbiased. But I look at the odds makers, and there's certain things I'm like, okay, like I can give my analysis on that. I'm like, oh well, the odds makers are they're thinking the right way, or et cetera, et cetera.
Because there's 2 fights. Yeah, I'm just going to give my opinion on them. I think Teofimo Lopez is going to upset Lomachenko, and I actually think Santa Cruz is going to upset Tank Davis. Believe it or not, I think his volume is Tank likes to take breaks, he likes to rest on the ropes a lot. The fight's at 130. I just think that Santa Cruz has had to turn it up. I think he can fight at range. I think he can fight in close. I think he's very versatile.
Yeah,
I think he's always conditioned. I think he'll be able to steal rounds. And if Tank doesn't stop him, I think he can win it. I think he can outwork him and win a decision.
Well, you're right. I mean, look, and I agree with you. That's what makes this fight so compelling.
Yeah,
is because Leo Santa Cruz is all about volume. Yeah, he's a very good boxer as well. But when you throw a lot of volume of punches, then you leave yourself open and susceptible to be countered. And you know that Gervonta Davis has that one-punch eraser, and he's so fast. So it just all depends who's going to be able to implement their game plan better. That's why I think it is such a 50-50 fight. It is such a compelling matchup. If Gervonta Davis wins, the kid furthers his stardom. He is a big ticket seller here in the United States.
Yeah, he's doing good.
Santa Cruz wins. I mean, he's already kind of the king of LA when it comes to boxing, but his star would even increase that much more.
Yeah. And also, too, I'm very intrigued about Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia, because we're all wondering what Errol Spence is going to look like in his next fight, obviously after the accident. Should we be concerned about that? I mean, he says he's all right. He looks like he's okay.
Yeah.
Do you suspect possibly there could be some, post-traumatic stress from the accident? Is that a question mark there, or what do you think?
I talked to Derek James last week. I was down in Houston for Jamal and Jermell Charlo's respective media workouts, hosting that for Premier Boxing Champions and Showtime. And I'll tell you, I asked, Derek, hey, how's Errol doing and stuff? He goes, Errol is looking fantastic. I don't think there's going to be any ill effects from the accident, but let's take into account that it's going to be a 13-month layoff, nearly a 14-month layoff for Errol Spence. And Errol told me on Premier Boxing Champions, I do a show every week on Instagram Live, and he told me, I asked him, if, with fighting Danny Garcia, why the fight and stuff. He goes, look, they asked me if I wanted to tune up. They offered me tune-ups, but I said, no, I want to fight the best and give me my mandatory. I think that just goes to show you the kind of champion that Errol Spence is. Coming off of that layoff, the car accident, but he wants to fight the best. Errol Spence is about furthering his legacy. And also, you can't write off Danny Garcia, because Danny Garcia's been fighting at the top level since probably 2012 when he knocked out Amir Khan. He's been fighting high-level guys at 140 and 147 for over 8 years. You can't count out Danny Garcia whatsoever. So, I mean, look, I know that Errol Spence, Derek James said today on social media, I saw it on a few reports that Errol's going to start to spar either today or later this week. So that's a very positive sign. You know, Danny Garcia is going to always be in shape, always be ready. And I think he has a very high ring IQ inside that ring. What's going to happen? We'll find out November 21st, but I'm really excited about that one. I think for people that are sleeping on that fight, don't sleep on it because it's going to be a heck of a battle.
And we thought that Spence was going to, well, a lot of us thought that Spence was going to dominate Porter, and look what happened there. And again, Danny Garcia, even in his losses, he's never been thoroughly soundly beaten. He's always, made a good account of himself in every single fight, even in his losses. So this could be a more competitive fight than a lot of people are giving it credit for.
I agree with you. I think the key for Danny, though, Joe, is he has to start faster. He didn't start as fast in the Thurman fight. He didn't start that fast in the Porter fight. He's got to, from the time that bell rings, he cannot give up too many early rounds, because if you start giving up early rounds to Errol Spence, then you start reaching, you start looking for that home run shot. You leave yourself exposed against Errol Spence. Dangerous things can happen to you if you start overextending yourself. So that's where this fight is so unique, and I think it's going to be a really good matchup at 147.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one last one before I let you go, and I really appreciate the time today. This is great because I know you're a busy guy. You got everything going on this week.
We appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah. Do you think that this Wilder Fury 3 fight will happen this year? Should we be optimistic about that, or?
I'm hopeful because, with the new Raiders Stadium that's opening up tonight, I think that if the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and again, I don't think it's in the hands of the promoters. I think it's in the hands of the State Athletic Commission when it comes to that fight is so big, fans need to be in attendance. Now, will the Nevada State Athletic Commission, will Bob Bennett and company say, you could do it at the Raiders Stadium, at Allegiant Stadium, social distance fans? What's the capacity going to be? Will you allow 15,000 fans? Will you allow 20,000 fans?
Yeah.
That then opens up the door for the promoters to say, okay, this is what our maximum attendance can be. And let's start to look at potentially what we can make at the gate. That will determine if the fight will take place. But until fans are allowed, then we have, I'm hopeful that that Bob Bennett and company will say yes, and we can get that fight, what I'm seeing from Bob Arum, a week before Christmas. But again, it's not even in the hands of the fighters, the promoters. It's in the hands of no one from a business standpoint in boxing. It is literally the State Athletic Commission that is appointed by the governor of the state of Nevada that makes that decision. So it's out of my boss's hands. It's out of everyone's hands. The governor of Nevada and the State Athletic Commission, they're the ones who are going to say yes or no fans can come back. I'm hopeful they are, but if not, I'm all about the safety of the fans and the fighters. And if it's got to be moved to an early part of next year, that's okay too. But from a selfish standpoint, let's get it on week before Christmas, Joe. That'd be a nice Christmas present.
Wonderful. Ray, again, thank you so much. It's really nice to hear a positive voice for a change of the sport of boxing. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for uplifting us as fans and people who follow the sport. I really appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
Joe, thank you so much. Continue the great work. Anytime you need me on, my friend, by all means. Hope everyone can tune in 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific time, PBC on FS1 Wednesday night.
Thank you, Ray. Have a good one.
Stay safe.